Alright, so we're starting with showing the beginning of my day where I'm just kind of making a coffee. I think this footage will just allow me some time to explain kind of what this video is about while not having you stare at a blank space. So essentially, this video is mainly about the composting process that I have been doing, testing, and how it's actually worked. When people ask me what I've been up to, sometimes I find it's very difficult to really encapsulate the things that I've been doing. And I think that one of the best ways to have the conversation is to actually show what I've been up to. Because sometimes the word composting is just one and done and it doesn't really get into the nitty gritty details of what is actually happening. And the other thing is also that sometimes when people ask you, what have you been up to? It's just really conversational and they're not really interested. But for people who are interested, I would really like to show them what I have been up to. Composting can kind of be seen as boring, but actually there's just so much happening throughout the whole process that as I've been doing it, I'm just kind of amazed by how everything works. And so with this video, you'll be able to see the end-to-end of a process that I think has been working quite well for me. And it involves quite a mix of different systems, including the Japanese Bokashi system, which is using microorganisms to pre-digest the kitchen waste. And then you'll see in the later parts of this video using traditional composting, the hot composting methods, and also, to my surprise, black soldier fly larvae, which was something that I had no idea about until I started my quote-unquote composting journey. Where possible, I will try to provide links to some videos that have helped me in different parts of this composting, whether it's the how-tos or the information regarding certain aspects of it. I don't feel like we really need to talk about that all over again. And ultimately, this video will probably be the start of me doing more videos about kind of me developing a broader philosophy on life and how I want to live, the things I've discovered and that I've learned, and actually thinking to myself what sort of life would be worthwhile. So anyway, you don't have to see me continue to make this coffee. We will just get into it. So we start off with our kitchen waste, and it's a mix really. I put mostly everything in it. Over here we've got some fruit, sourdough discards, fish bones, eggshells, and once the bin is full, I bring it over to the composting area in the garden. So the first step that we do is the Bokashi system, and essentially Bokashi is using microorganisms to pre-digest the food. And what this does is allows the composting of meat and dairy as well, which is something that sometimes people don't do in their composting system because they're afraid of rats or any other pests getting in. But because we do this process, the fermentation means that it's not very attractive to different pests and scavengers. So I add the food in and I add the flakes in as well. You see I have two bins there, so once one is full, I press it down, getting rid of all the air, and because it's an anaerobic process, and I let it just ferment there for 2 weeks. And while I do that, then I'm starting to fill up the other bin. And so it's constantly rotating systems that I use. And right now I'm using store-bought flakes, but I actually think there's a way to make your own or cultivate your own microorganisms. And that's something that I'll look at in the future as well, just to kind of understand the whole cycle and not rely on having to buy this. But it is definitely handy when you can just buy it as well. So now I'm just pressing down, getting rid of any extra air that's in there that will kind of affect the fermentation process. And just close up the lid. So after about 2 weeks, it's time to add the fermented bokashi food waste into the compost pile. And in this compost pile, I'm just going to dig through a bit just to show you something that I found while I was doing this whole process of composting. And that is the presence of black soldier fly larvae. I was not expecting this in my compost pile, and to be honest, their significance is hard to explain in this short video, but I'll probably do a separate video about them at a later date. You see that one there? So cute, helping me eat my scraps. Yes. So now it's time to add the bokashi into the bin. I've kind of sped up this part of the video just because it was a bit long. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm breaking up the fermented food, and then I am adding in some additional soil, and there's some charcoal in there as well that I'm adding in. And you don't have to add a lot of soil in, to be honest, because I've already got soil in that compost pile, but I'm really trying to beef up this compost because I actually want to use it quite soon. So I'm adding more soil into it. By using multiple ways of decomposing the food, it kind of allows a lot of flexibility in how I do things. And also I add some grass clippings as well. Again, it's to kind of beef up this compost because I want to use it quite soon. And after the grass has been added, I add just a final layer of dirt just to kind of top it all off and make it neat. And I'll put the tarp on top to keep the moisture after I spread out the dirt, I guess. So it's been about 2 weeks now since we've added the bokashi food waste into the compost pile. And so let's just see what's in here at the moment. It's important to note that this composting method, I don't really do any turning of the compost. I kind of just leave it as is. And the only time I'm actually moving anything is when I'm adding the bokashi food waste in there. But for the purposes of just seeing how everything's going, I'm going to just dig it out a little bit so that we can see what's happening there. It's a bit hard to look into the center of the thing because every time I'm pulling it out, the dirt just kind of falls back in. But you can still see that there's still food waste in there. But that's totally fine because it's still decomposing at this time. You'll also see that there's actually very little larva activity, and I don't think I'm deep enough to really see what's happening. But it could also be because they're starting to exhaust the food supply, and they are moving out essentially. The larvae turn into these flies that don't have any mouths or anything, and are relatively harmless. The chances are that you've probably never seen a black soldier fly out in the wild because they typically aren't present anywhere that we are. They're not really pests or anything. They just kind of do their own thing and have their own life cycle. Essentially, I'm just rummaging around just to kind of see what everything's looking like. And it looks alright. It's slowly decomposing. That's the beauty of it, watching this whole thing transform. This is probably a better angle just to see how it's doing. It's looking quite wet, but otherwise it's fine. So normally, if I wasn't going to use this compost soon, I would be adding more food waste in here around this time as well, because my other bin would be full and I'd be adding it into the center of this place, and the process keeps building as we go along. But since I'm going to be using this soon, I'm not adding any new things into it anymore. So you'll see there's like a few larvae in there, but really the activity's slowed down heaps. And this is a few days later, and you'll see that it's starting to heat up. So the composting process is transitioning to another form of composting where they call it hot compost. Essentially, the bacteria is working inside and digesting the material, and as it's doing so, it's creating heat. And at this point, the larvae have totally gone. They've gone somewhere else because it's too hot in the middle there for them. But I just find that so amazing. So this is another 2 weeks later, and I'm pretty much going to be using this compost now. So digging it out and just going to be putting it into my garden bed, which we'll see later on. But you'll see that even after these 2 weeks, it's transformed heaps, really. It looks more like soil, and you'll still get clumps of things that maybe haven't biodegraded. Like on that right side there, you'll see there's a big piece of bone, but I'm just adding this, and I don't really feel like separating things and making it too complicated. The whole point is to make it easy to use, and so I don't I don't make it any more complicated than it needs to be. That sort of stuff can just go into the garden bed. It's not going to do any harm. But yes, you can see that it's looking more and more like soil now, which I just find it's amazing, really. I'm geeking out a little bit, but the fact that this waste could have just gone, to the rubbish bin and out of sight, out of mind, but instead I'm actually doing something with it, and it's something that's actually making my soil better is just so interesting. And yeah, so this is the compost in my garden bed. It's a bit wet right now because I've actually been doing other things to it that are kind of hard to explain in this video. But yeah, that's essentially the process that I use to, that's an eggshell there. That's the process that I use to get rid of my food waste.